Is it good? Okay, I think so. Hi everyone, my name is Glin and today I bring you a new project which is Barbie Rapunzel. There's a spoiler over here. Hi, my name is Glin. I'm a professional cosmaker and a cosplayer for over 10 years. I love cosplaying nostalgic characters, princesses, magical girls, and I make content about my projects and how I make them. So I've made this dress a couple of times for customers before, but I have never done it for myself, which is absolutely outrageous because Rapunzel was my favorite Barbie movie as a kid. So yeah, we need to fix this and make it happen. This video will be a little bit different from the ones I've made before because this one is actually going to be a proper tutorial. I'm going to show you every step of how I made this dress, and along with this video I will release the pattern for this dress. So if you're interested in making this costume and cosplaying Barbie Rapunzel, you can go look in my Ko-fi page or in my Etsy shop and you will find the pattern that you can buy and download to make yourself. So first let's talk a bit about this dress design. In the classical Barbie movies, usually Barbie has two different looks. So she has the dress that she wears in the movie as well as the dress she wears as a doll, and this usually is the design that they also use for the cover of the movie. For Rapunzel specifically, I really like both designs and I like to combine them in a way. I really like the sparkle of the movie as well as the gold details that she has in the bodice, and from the doll I really love those iridescent sleeves, so I've chosen to combine both designs and I picked some fabrics that I think will go lovely on this project. The first thing you'll need to do is you'll need to print the first page of your pattern and check the proportions, and if it's correct you can go ahead and print the rest of your pattern. Trim all the edges of your pages, and once this is done you can finally lay them on the table so it's easier for you to understand what connects to what, and finally tape all the pieces together. And doing this you will end up with a big sheet of paper with your full pattern on it. Once that's done, you can go ahead and cut each individual piece of this pattern. I prefer to use an X-Acto knife, and if you do this, make sure to have some sort of base under it so you don't ruin your table. And yeah, I cut exactly the size that I need. There's a measurement guide on your pattern so you can go and check what size is best for you. And please don't forget that this pattern does not have a seam allowance included, so you will have to add that later when you are cutting the pieces on the fabric. I decided to start with the skirt, so you can see me here cutting the purple pieces on a folded piece of fabric, and then I cut the extra pink part of the skirt. And since this is basically a half circle skirt, I decided to hem everything using a rolled hem foot. This makes it so much faster and easier. It gives you a very neat finish, and also you can have just a very small seam allowance and it works perfectly. You have this rolled foot in many different sizes, so you can pick whatever you prefer. This is the narrowest I could find and I really love this finish, so I did the exact same finish for all the pieces except the lace fabric piece. So just like I said before, the lace fabric has a different finish, and what I did is I used a zigzag stitch and I only am folding this fabric once, so that's enough to keep it from fraying or losing any of its sequins. And yeah, I really like the finish. It's very seamless. So here's what I did today. I hemmed all of my skirt pieces. So I have the gold lace, the satin purple base skirt. So these ones are basically the same piece. This one is gonna go on top of this one. And then for the pink part of the skirt, I decided to do something a little different. And I have the pink satin and the pink glitter tulle, but I decided to add this layer of iridescent organza so it matches better with her sleeves. over here, which I already cut, and I'm also going to do organza and glitter tulle, so there's more of a connection between these two pieces. And this fabric is so magical to me that I think it will work very well for Rapunzel. Now, before sewing all the skirt pieces together, I am ironing my fabric, and I am ashamed because I should have done this before even cutting it. So do as I say, not as I do. But after everything is ironed and very smooth, I am pinning all of the pieces that go into the pink part of the skirt, because this is a lot of layers and it's going to be hard to deal with later. So I do this first, and after it I did a basting stitch, just a very long stitch that's easier to remove in the end. And after that I can finally pin the other two layers onto this piece. So this is going to be one of the two seams that go into this skirt. This is a very easy skirt. So I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm pinning all of the layers together so that I can stitch everything. Now you can sew exactly what we just pinned, and after sewing it with the straight stitch, I flip this piece and I do a zigzag stitch over it so it doesn't fray. However, if you do have an overlock machine, it's easier and you just don't have to do that. Just overlock it, it's much easier and faster. I just don't have that machine. And now it's time to prepare the waistband. So in here you can see me folding it in half and pressing it. This gives it a crisper fold and it's easier to work with later on. Now you guys, I'm going to teach you my absolute favorite method of gathering huge skirts. However, I call it gathering, but this is more of a pleating. But if you do tiny pleats, it kind of looks like gathering anyway. So yeah, just keep with me, it's going to look amazing. So the first step that you need to do is you're going to take the right end of your waistband and you're going to connect it to the right end of your skirt piece seam and pin that down. Once you've done that, you can do the exact same thing on the left. So you take the left side of your waistband and you pin it to the left side of your skirt piece, and you'll end up with something like this. Now you take the both ends that you just pinned, you put them together and you fold both of your fabrics. What you're gonna get is you're gonna reach the middle point of the skirt piece as well as the middle point of your waistband, and you're going to connect and pin those as well, just like we did before. And then you repeat this process over and over and over again, as much times as you want. And the more folds that you do and the more that you pin your fabric, the more even is your gathering. So I really like to do it a few times. And now I'll leave you with some unedited footage so you can see easier how I do this. But if you already understood, you can skip ahead, and it's basically the same thing over and over again. In the end, I will show you how it looks so you can have a better idea of how many times I did this and how it's supposed to look before you actually sew it. So in the end it looks like this. You can pin it more, and I actually recommend you to pin it more so it's easier to gather while you're sewing. Now with the fabric all pinned and distributed, it's much easier to do the pleats. So I'm just doing small hand pleats in these gaps of the fabric, and I am attaching it as I go, making sure to stop before I reach a pin and remove it so I do not break a needle. So be careful with that, guys. Now, after sewing that, we are going to fold this waistband exactly where we pre-pressed it, and then we're going to roll this fabric in so it aligns with the line that we just created, and this way when we are stitching on this fold, it's going to catch the other side of the fabric and give it a very clean bias tape look to our waistband. And notice that I'm pinning it vertically instead of horizontally, which is what I usually do. And that's just because it covers more surface and it's very easy to remove as I'm sewing along. And I'm sorry I'm covering it with my hands. I couldn't tell when I was filming, but hopefully you understand. So you can sew very close to the fold that we just pinned. And this is where I noticed that my bobbin thread was gone. So yeah, I know, very relatable, guys. This pisses me off so bad and somehow it keeps happening. But yeah, we'll fix that very quickly. Okay, almost there. We ready? Let's go round 2. I hate when this happens, I swear. Okay, so here's a little preview of how it looks sewn on the other side. As you can see, it's super clean and I love this finish. I really love it. After sewing your waistband, you're going to measure 15 centimeters from your waistband on both sides of your skirt. So on the left, you're going to measure and pin, and then on the right, in the pink side of the skirt, you're going to do the exact same thing. And then connect these 2 points by pinning them together, and from that point to the edge of the skirt, so to the bottom of the skirt, you're going to pin everything so that we can finally sew this skirt shut. After pinning and sewing everything together, you will end up with a gap like this. So what you're going to do to finish these edges is you're going to fold them once and then twice to create a rolled hem, and then you just stitch along the fold as close as you can so it creates a neater finish. Here you can see me folding as I sew. However, if you don't feel comfortable with that, you can definitely pin this down before you go to your machine. So once you reach the end of the gap, you're going to put your needle down and pivot your piece so it's on a 90-degree angle, and then you're going to do the exact same thing, fold twice, sew until you reach the fold, and then pivot again and finish the rest of the seam just like we did on the other side. Oh, and don't forget, when you finish sewing this, you will need to backstitch just to secure your stitches, so do not forget that. And you guys, I totally forgot to record this, but once you're done doing this step, you are going to hand stitch your hook and eye to actually make the closure of the skirt. So the hook is sewn directly on the very edge of the waistband, and the eye is sewn where you have a mark in your pattern. So that's the skirt done. I really like how it turned out. However, I do think it kind of needs a slightly bigger petticoat, so maybe I'll make a new one just so it has a little bit more volume. Okay, so now that the skirt is out of the way, I think it's time for us to work on the bodice. I know this part is a bit daunting for some people, but trust me, if you have a nice pattern, it's not that hard to understand. So for my very own dress, I'm going to use the pattern that I have for sale for you guys to use, so you can see how easy it is to actually make this. This bodice is made with 2 layers of fabric. You have the strength fabric, which is the innermost layer of the bodice, and for this you can use canvas or twill. Just make sure it's a very strong fabric that doesn't have any type of stretch. And for the fashion layer, you can go crazy and pick whatever feels prettier for you. So for me, I decided to go for purple satin, and for the centerpiece of the bodice, I used the same combination of pink satin with glitter tulle. Like I said before, this pattern does not include the seam allowance, and for me that's better because you can use whatever seam allowance you prefer. One method that I really like to use so I can skip the drawing of the seam allowance is I put some magnets on my scissors and I use this as a guide to cut the pieces. It does require me to use smaller cuts instead of fuller ones, but I feel it's much quicker than actually having to draw and measure all of the seam allowances, trace them, and then cut. So if you want to use this method too, it's pretty easy and very effective. So yes, I also already cut all the bodice pieces. The fabric that I'm using for the structure layer of this bodice is this beautiful floral purple canvas, and I feel like it's so perfect for Rapunzel. I'm so happy about it. No one is gonna see this, but I'll know it's there. Now this is probably going to be very obvious, but you're going to stitch all your layers, all your pieces and layers together. So make sure to have all the edges aligned so the fabrics lay flat on each other. And once you're done with sewing all of the bodice pieces, you're going to cut your boning. Now you can use whatever boning you prefer. In here in this project I decided to use Ridgeline because this is not going to be a very severe waist reduction, so Ridgeline does the job, and it has the benefit that you can sew it directly onto your piece. Just make sure to seal the edges. I usually use a little flame, so you can use a lighter or a candle and slowly melt the edges together so there's no peeking of the little plastic pieces. And in here you can see me sew it straight together. If you prefer to use another type of boning, like for example you can use spiral steel boning or plastic boning, if you do that you will need to replace this step with boning channels. So instead of sewing the boning, you are going to sew the tape to create channels to insert your boning. And what I do is I open the seam and I sew it directly on top of it. And now I didn't open my seams with an iron just because I'm very used to doing this like this. However, I do recommend you do that. So again, do as I say, not as I do. Do press your seams open so it's easier for you to do this step and to control where the fabric goes. By the way, when you are adding your boning, make sure to add one to the middle piece as well. On the pattern, this is half a piece, so it would have a seam over here where you would add the boning. But in my case, I cut it in the folded piece of fabric, so this is just one piece, there's no seam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these two dots, so the bottom V to the top V, and I'll create a line, and along that line I'm going to sew a piece of boning. And this helps of course with structure, but also keeping this little point straight so it doesn't go folded like this over your skirt. And now that the boning is almost all inserted, look how clean it is. And now for the closure of the bodice, you are going to go to your last piece and you're going to fold it and stitch it down so it creates an extra boning channel for you to insert the boning that goes right close to the eyelets. And this helps the eyelets not to be wrinkly, and it improves the structure of the bodice. And you are going to fold the remaining fabric inwards and then stitch that again. I do this because it creates more thickness to this piece, and the eyelets just become sturdier when they are on a thicker piece of fabric. At least that's my experience. So I usually do this pretty much every single time. And by the way, for the fold, I do baste the line that's written in the pattern, just so it's easier for me to control the fabric while sewing. But you don't need to do that. You can just mark it and pin it down, just so it's easier for you to fold it. And again, do as I say, not as I do. Do press it before you stitch. That makes it so much cleaner and so much easier. I'm just really used to doing this way, so that's why I skipped that step. Look, it's so clean. And now we're ready to insert the boning and add the eyelets. So I just finished adding all of the boning and binding the edges, and this is what it's looking like. So now I'm going to add the eyelets so that I can finally close it, and this is what the inside looks like. So this is the piece of boning I told you about earlier, and I decided to finish all my edges with bias binding that I made myself out of this pretty purple flowery fabric, very Rapunzel. So yes, now I'm going to add the eyelets and put it on the mannequin so that I can finally start with the detailing. I need to add some gold lace here that I bought here. So I had this very pretty lace that I'll add here and also here. And then I need a big flower. The first thing you need to do to add your eyelets is you need to mark them down. So I mark the top and the bottom eyelets first, and then I divide that by 2 and I mark the middle eyelet. And the remaining space, I think I divided into 3, but you can do whatever division you want to add, just as long as the eyelets are pretty close together. And then I use this hole puncher to create the holes for my eyelets. Once that's done, it's time to finally add these eyelets, and I use this old machine that I have. I bought it a long time ago, and I make sure to add the washer so this way they are more secure onto the fabric. And now that the main portion of the bodice is done, it's time to work on the sleeves so we can attach them to what we just did. Like I told you before, I really like the sleeves on the doll, which are just made out of iridescent organza. However, I really like the sparkle of the movie, so I decided to do 2 layers for the sleeves, and I have 1 layer of iridescent organza and then 1 layer of pink glitter tulle. This really helps to make it more magical looking and also very fluffy and airy. So yes, that's what I did. Now, these sleeves are gathered in the middle, so they create the puff sleeve on top and the ruffle on the bottom. However, I did not want to make this gather permanent and without stretch. So for this, instead of hand gathering it, I decided to use some elastic. That way, it will always fit me. I cut my sleeve pieces out of organza and tulle, and what you see me doing here is I am basting down that line in your pattern that is basically the elastic line. This just helps me to keep it straight while sewing, so it's easier to follow. Basically it's a guide, and I'm doing a very loose stitch, so it's easier to remove in the end. And here is said elastic, so I'm stretching it as I sew for maximum elasticity. And it's kind of finicky because these fabric layers are, well, organza, so they're finicky as hell. But when you finish doing that, you will have something like this. So it's a puff sleeve on top and a ruffle on the bottom. The fact that it's an elastic is very nice because you can adjust it. And then I sew the sleeve shut and I am pinning it down to the armhole of the bodice. So on the 2 panels directly under the armpit, I do no folds whatsoever, no gathering, I just pin it flat. And then the rest, I do the same method that I teach you for the skirt. So I pin the top part of the sleeve to the top seam, and then I fold it, I divide the fabric and I pin it down. It's the exact same method, it's the same thing. However, if you prefer, you can do a basting stitch along the top of the sleeve and then gather it by hand by pulling your thread. I saw a lot of people doing that. I've done it before. It's really easy. I would say maybe easier, but I'm just very used to this technique, so I use it all the time. That's why I'm doing it like this. And in a minute I will show you how it's looking. So as you can see, you have all these folds, I would say, these gathers, and once you are stitching it, you will do the tiny pleats that we did in the skirt, exact same thing. I'm removing this part of the machine so it's easier for me to slide the sleeve into it, and I'm stitching it directly with the bias tape, so I'm skipping one step, but you can do stitch the sleeve first and then add the bias. That's totally fine. Again, like I said, I'm just skipping a step. Everything to make it faster, right guys? And once you're done sewing that side of the bias tape, I'm going to finish the other side by hand, so it's the least visible seam possible. However, you can most definitely finish it by machine. Just make sure that your bobbin thread matches your fashion layer fabric, so it's clean. Once everything is sewn and all the hems are finished, it's time to add the decorations, and I am so happy that I found this beautiful lace to add in all the lines of this bodice. I add it by hand stitching it directly onto the bodice, and I make sure to use a gold thread so it's not seen. However, you can use a beige thread or even a clear synthetic thread, just so it's the most seamless possible. Now for the final touches, I added 3 fabric roses to this bodice and it is ready! I really like how it turned out. It's such a cute dress, so magical and sparkly without it being too much in my opinion. And yeah, it fits me wonderful. It's super comfortable. It being adjustable is one of the most amazing things about it. So if you liked how this dress turned out and you want to make it yourself, I remind you that I have this pattern available on my Ko-fi page and on my Etsy shop, and it's a digital pattern so you can download it, print it at home, assemble it and make all this yourself. And if you like this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I love making costume tutorials. I do a lot of cosplay content, so it would be wonderful to have you here with me on this cosplay journey. And yeah, I guess that's it. I'll see you next time for a video about the wig and the crown. I'm still waiting for some materials to arrive, so yes, I should be making that pretty soon as well. See you later guys, bye!